Austin, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Steve Adler. Good to see you. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for being here. So you cost me money. All over town, you cost me money. I had bet that you were going to fold like a card table before South by and bring Uber back. And I was wrong.
Well, you know, we have the only open market in the world right now.
You're going to argue this is a positive.
It is a positive. What happens when a monopoly or a duopoly leaves is you have a vacuum, and the market does exactly what you'd expect. We have competition and innovation. We have 11,000 fingerprinted drivers.
But isn't this cleanup on aisle Austin? This is not the intention. This is what you've done to make up for the fact that Uber is not here. I mean, you didn't go into this thinking, I know we'll create a huge market for ride-hailing companies. What you did was, and you may very well, I know you will defend it. It may very well be justifiable, but you went into this not trying to create a market. You went into this to try to solve a problem that you believed you had with Uber and Lyft.
We went in it with no intention of Uber and Lyft leaving.
Right.
Yes.
You believe they left. We didn't kick them out. You didn't kick them out. The voters didn't kick them out. They left.
And they did.
Yeah.
You know, we tried really hard to keep them here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of innovation with those companies. They're providing a service that a lot of people use.
Right.
Our goal was to try to find a way for them to be able to be in a city and in a new regulatory kind of structure.
Right.
And it obviously didn't work out.
The demands, air quotes around that word demands, the demands that the city put on Uber and Lyft are materially different than the demands that they've been subject to in other places?
Well,
because there's some misunderstanding about that. People say,
right.
Well, but they're agreeing to be fingerprinted in city X or in community Y. Why not Austin?
And they are. They're being fingerprinted in New York. They're being fingerprinted in Houston.
Right.
And the requirements here are actually less than what they were in Houston.
So what happened?
You need to ask them that question.
Well, you've certainly had the conversation. Save me the middle step. Tell me what they said.
What they said is that Houston was early out and the market wasn't performing the way that they hoped that it would.
Right.
And if they were to do it again, they wouldn't do it in Houston.
Do you worry, Mr. Mayor, obviously the circus has come into town today.
Huh?
We'll have thousands of haircuts and cell phones arriving at our airport from someplace else. And they're all going to get out of the airport and they're going to go to their phones and they're going to open up their Uber apps and they're going to be disappointed. Do you worry about 50,000 people from Los Angeles and New York saying what the actual what when they can't get an Uber on their phones?
I do, and obviously it's an issue. But, people expected with Austin City Limits, with ACL, that people would arrive by the droves, they wouldn't know what to do, and the world would fall apart.
They figured it out.
They figured it out.
Yeah.
These are smart people coming in.
And they can
have
make it work.
smartphones.
Jason Stanford wrote that one for you, didn't he? I know it. He wrote that line for you. So there's the practical problem of people get out of the plane and they go out to the curb and they try to find an Uber and they can't find an Uber. But do you believe that, and let me get to the second part of that in a second, but the first part is, do you believe that the services provided by the companies that have risen up into this amazing marketplace that you've forced to come into existence, are those services up to the services of Uber and Lyft? The Statesman actually has a story today or yesterday in which they basically road tested in a literal sense the other services, and they found them to be fine. Some better than others, but fine. You think we're getting out of the other services quality service?
I think we are. It's different. It doesn't quite have the reach, probably, that Uber and Lyft had.
Right.
But the service itself is real good, as you would expect with competition and innovation.
Right.
But as we move forward in the 21st century, we're going to have to find what is the proper intersection of new economies, new sharing economies, new platforms, and government regulation. And it's going to take companies and governments that can sit down and work together to find the best way to maximize the economies and the platforms, but still allow government to be able to deal with safety issues.
Yeah.
We haven't figured out that place right now. We have to have both sides sitting at the table to figure that out.
Yeah.
And what happened here in Austin is Uber and Lyft, frankly, thought they didn't need to do that because they were so sure that they'd be able to win an election. And it was a missed opportunity that we had here in the city. You know, going back into the industrial age, you know, new regulations came out 100 years ago, not because the work that 10 and 11-year-olds did in the factory wasn't cheaper for the public. The public loved having cheap goods, and the smaller hands actually did the needlepoint better. The public loved that. But we decided that we weren't going to let 10 and 11-year-olds work in factories, even though the market was willing to buy their products.
There's a principle at work.
There's an intersection. Well, there's an intersection, and we need to find out what that intersection, and it requires companies and governments to work together.
So the second part of this, though, there's the practical issue, and then there's the philosophical issue or the branding issue. I talked to a bunch of people who are opposed to you on this issue, people in the legislature, and I said, what would you ask the mayor if you had an opportunity to visit with him? And they said, among other things, they said, how do you feel about Austin's reputation a year out? Has Austin's reputation as the innovation capital and the tech capital and the disruption capital taken a hit? That has been Austin's brand as much as music. It's been Austin's brand as much as anything. Austin is supposed to be the city that embraces the new world, and somehow this is a not new world situation. What do you think about that?
Well, obviously I'm concerned about Austin's brand, but I'll tell you that our brand as an innovative community and cutting edge is stronger today than it was a year ago. Now, I recognize,
not as a result of this, but despite it.
And in a lot of places because of this.
There are people who think Austin is hipper because we don't have Uber and Lyft, really?
There are people that are writing about this right now in the magazines and the articles that are read by the hyper innovator community that recognize that what we offered back last December and January in creating our tech community and creating the first ever independent third-party, independent cross-platform validator badge was an innovation to solve this issue, to actually give choice to the people in the public, not have a mandatory fingerprint requirement at all, that we were actually innovating too fast for Uber and Lyft. The big companies, they get a little conservative, they get kind of stuck in a model. We went past them, and quite frankly, we moved too fast.
So your argument is that you were ready to be innovative and disruptive, and people misunderstand. They think that you were trying to drag people back to the Stone Age, when in fact you were trying to drag them forward to the future.
That is exactly correct.
Right. You're going to make a deal with them to get them back here at some point?
You know, elections have consequences. There was an opportunity for us to really sit down and do that, but they insisted on a vote, and when you have 60% of the electorate take a vote, you know, as an elected official now, I respect the vote.
There's no way for you to come. Hold on, wait a minute. There's no way, you're saying there's no way for them to come back without going back to the ballot box?
Well, you know, obviously, you know, it's in front of the legislature, and
well, we'll get to that. Oh, believe me, we're going to get to that in a second. Yeah.
Right. And then there's the legislature.
Right.
But you know, the people took a vote, and I said back before the vote, in anticipation of the vote, after the vote, that I'm eager to sit down with Uber and Lyft and talk to them. There are technologies they can bring in terms of car share and ride share carpooling. You know, they have the ability to invest $500,000 a day.
Your message to Uber is, we're ready to talk, come back to the table if you want to talk.
I have always been ready to talk to Uber.
Does the fact that Uber is having massive problems at the management level now, sexual harassment and the revelation that they may have been using some technology to avoid law enforcement detection, does that give you a stronger hand? Uber is kind of in a bad way right now. Do you have a better negotiating position today than you would have as a result of that?
Well, it certainly gives government, as it should give all people, pause.
Yeah. So why is the legislature up in your grill on this? What exactly about this gives the legislature their place in this conversation? What do you think is going on here? You alluded to the fact that the legislature will have its say. What is the legislature's problem with you and with Austin?
Well, I think that, you know, to a degree, the cultural values in Austin are different than they are in many parts of the state. And I think that's where it begins. Austin is different than...
So if this had been a Denton ride-hailing ban, well, I guess they didn't like the fracking ban in Denton. That may be a bad example. If this had been a ride-hailing ban in the city of Alice, you think the legislature would be as concerned about it as it is in Austin?
Well, I'm not sure that the city of Alice would have taken the same position that the city of Austin did. Yeah. Because of that cultural difference. You know, Houston's a great city. Alice is a great city. They're just different from Austin. And I think that we should be celebrating as a state the differences in communities. Yeah. Austin represents 7% of the population in the state of Texas. But we also represent a third of the patents and half the venture capital. We are a different city, and frankly, Houston, wonderful city, has a different economy. Dallas, wonderful city, has a different economy, different values, and kind of like in our retirement portfolios, it's good to have a diversified portfolio. So during cycles in markets, different cities are going to perform differently, and you know, Austin is weird, but what is weird to some is home to creative, innovative people. Yeah. Google and Apple and Facebook are here because the people they want to hire want to live in Austin, Texas. They want to live in Austin, Texas because of the culture and values as evidenced by the ordinances and resolutions that we pass. Right. That's why they want to come. And if this state's going to stay strong, we need a place for those people to come too. So our economy can, otherwise they're going to go to Santa Fe.
So is there a reverse bathroom bill argument to be made here that if the legislature forces Austin to be like every place else, that you may lose business or you may lose recruitment opportunities? Or are you prepared to say that the legislature getting its hands in this potentially poses a risk to Austin?
Absolutely.
Do you think so? Do you have any evidence of that?
We have our convention people are telling us right now that they've had at least 22 conventions.
Well, but that's all bathroom bill specifically. I'm saying that if the city comes, I'm saying not, we'll come to that too, but I'm saying if the legislature gets into this Uber issue at the statewide level and says we're going to standardize the requirements for ride-hailing relationships with municipalities, do you have any tangible evidence or reason to believe that somehow it will have an adverse effect on your ability to attract businesses or recruit employees or whatever else?
I have no quantified data, but I have reams of anecdotal evidence that the people that locate here in part because of the spirit and soul and feel of this community.
Austin goes its own way. Right. And the fact that Austin plays by its own rules or goes its own way is it's a feature, not a bug.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You went to Princeton, so you're smart. You understand the civics textbook argument that the states created the federal government and did so limiting the powers of the federal government deliberately, and the states also created the cities and counties. Why shouldn't the state tell you what to do? After all, they created the cities and counties, and the states get to tell the cities and counties what to do. That is the argument basically from the legislature. What do you got to say about that?
I believe that the government that's closest to the people can best represent the people's
You and Thomas Jefferson both believe that.
Me and Thomas Jefferson and what used to be a lot of the Republican Party. I really do believe that government that is closest to the people is going to be most representative of what they want. When I go to work, I don't go out of town. I go downtown. I go to the grocery store, and the people that I run into are my constituents, and they run into me and they have a laundry list. They have potholes, they have garbage that didn't get picked up, and by the way, they're going to vote for me, and they remind me.
And if they don't like what you did, they come to your house. That is one of the differences between local government and...
They show up on the front stoop.
Right, so if I'm Senator Charles Schwartner of Georgetown and I say, wait a minute, if I take an Uber from my home or my office, doctor's office in Georgetown to Austin, and I get dropped off and I do my business, and then I want to take an Uber back to Georgetown, I can't. There's something wrong with that. That's one of the arguments, if it's not that specific argument. In general, the argument is that if the communities have different rules, this patchwork of different regulations, that somehow it creates a burden for people, or a burden that you're basically an enemy of liberty. Why should people not be in a position to choose the business or to choose the option available to them? That's how this argument has been reframed. It's not local control, it's local liberty.
I understand that, and I think it is local liberty to let local people decide what the rules are in their city. And quite frankly, I believe that right now you can pick up that Uber in Georgetown and take it down to Austin, and if there's any inability to take an Uber out of Austin and get back to Georgetown, it's because the government has put into doubt the ability of the market to fill the need. I mean, right now we're in a situation where we have companies that are in Austin, but there's this cloud hanging over their head that says that the government's going to step in and interfere with the market and how the market develops. I believe that if this market were able to fully develop, not only would we have 10 different companies that were competing and over a half dozen that are doing real well, not only would we have 11,000 fingerprinted drivers, more drivers now than I understand that we had before, but we would also have a service that was reaching out to Georgetown with the frequency that the senator would like to have.
You understand that in the state's view of this, or the telling of that story, the state is not the cloud, the state is the sunshine. You're the cloud. You understand that's how the state sees this.
I do understand that.
Right. So let me move over to the bathroom bill, which, as much as it may seem is a different topic, is not that much of a topic. Why do you care about the safety of somebody in the back of a car but not in a bathroom? I'm asking you that question in my best Dan Patrick voice.
You know, I do care about safety. Quite frankly, in all these conversations, as a mayor of a city, I'm pretty tactical. I mean, people expect me to fill potholes. They expect me to make sure that the garbage gets picked up on time, and they expect me to help keep them safe. Lofty political and theoretical conversations, people don't want me to engage in. They want me to deal with
I want you
what's
to
real.
engage in that. Come on.
And that's why I'm here.
Yeah, right.
But there's a safety issue involved with the bathroom bill. We have children that...
You think it's a safety issue, but it's a different safety issue than the supporters of the bill think.
Absolutely. I've seen no evidence. I've heard no evidence.
Yeah.
No experiential evidence of people, predators going into bathrooms, transgender people attacking people in bathrooms, or anyone attacking anybody else in bathrooms this way. But I do know that there are children that were created by God exactly as they are, and those children are vulnerable, and they are being ostracized or hiding in their schools, and we have now reached a day and age where those kids can step forward and get some measure of acceptance and dignity. And with that, when that happens, an artificially high suicide rate drops down to be what is the norm in the population. Those kids are in trouble. Those kids are unsafe, and we should be doing everything we can to help them and to protect them. The other safety issue, I just have seen no evidence that it's real.
And candidly, I've asked people who support this bill, can you tell me what problem you're trying to solve? Is there an epidemic of men and women's restrooms or locker rooms that I'm not aware of? And they've not been able to point to specific evidence.
I think this is a bad solution in search of a non-existent problem.
Do you think there are any merits to the other side's argument at all? I was interested to see Ken Herman's column in The Statesman after the debate the other overnight into the morning, where he said, look, there are definitely people on both sides who make points that are worth listening to. I don't want to dismiss out of hand one side or the other side. Are you willing to give the other side any sympathy?
Absolutely.
Are there any points to be made that you can support?
If it were true, if we had experience that showed that passing this kind of not having this kind of bill meant that people were being attacked in bathrooms, then clearly we would need to take action. But the anecdotal information that we have from where this is actually being implemented does not suggest that exists. So I understand the concern. And if that concern were borne out, then we would need to act. We just haven't seen that happen.
The other side, the side that supports this bill, says this is not about discrimination. That is not the intent. And they also dispute that there is an indirect consequence that will be discriminatory. You disagree with that?
I do, but you know, I'm not saying these folks are discriminatory. I mean, I'm not dealing with their motivations.
You're not calling names.
No, I'm not. I'm just dealing with the facts in front of me. I have children that I know are in a bad place. I have children that I know have high suicide rates. I have children that are vulnerable and need our protection. I know that to be true. And then I have a suggestion that if we protect them, we may be endangering others. And we need to be very diligent, and we need to watch that.
But you don't see the evidence that there's an issue over here.
That's correct.
What's the effect of this on the city of Austin going to be if this law passes?
Well, we know immediately we're going to lose business. We know that...
So this gets back to the 22 conventions that you suggested. Right. I heard Tom Noonan of the Convention and Visitors Bureau on the steps of the Capitol earlier this week suggest that more than 20 conventions had told the city of Austin they would not come if the bill passes.
That's correct. And then also anecdotally, I've heard the companies that come here, that come to Austin, that have policies in their companies that support non-discriminatory policies will not look at Austin the same way. And quite frankly, that wouldn't surprise me. That would be consistent with when we go out and sell this state, when we go out and sell people to come to Texas to help with our economy, and we do that through selling Austin, we sell Austin values. We go to those companies and we say, this is who we are.
Right. Now, the city of Austin, the city of Houston, forgive me, as you know, voted on the HERO ordinance in a way that gives the supporters of this bill reason to believe that your bluff should be called on this. They say, well, the city of Houston cast the vote that they cast, and the world was predicted to come to an end, and it didn't. Business wasn't lost. Super Bowl still came. People haven't stopped going to Houston. Why shouldn't we call Tom Noonan's bluff? Why shouldn't we call your bluff? That's what the supporters of this bill say. You're predicting doom and gloom, but up to this point, doom and gloom has not occurred, at least in the one place in which people predicted it would.
You know, the evidence that we have from North Carolina tells us two things.
You know that the other side calls that evidence BS. You know that.
It gives us two indications,
right.
and people claim that there's a conflict, and there's not. On the one side, people say the economy in North Carolina is doing great, and it's growing, and that's true. On the other hand, the evidence shows that there's been loss of economy as a result of the acts. Those things are not inconsistent. The question is, where would North Carolina be in terms of growth and new jobs and new economy if they had not passed that?
Right.
I don't think that the economy in Texas falls apart if we do this, but I do believe that the evidence suggests that we will not get to where it is that we need to go.
Yeah.
And again, Houston is different than Austin. We sell ourselves differently. People come to our cities for different reasons. People come to Austin because they find a like-minded community and an expression of values in the ordinances that are passed locally. That's one of the reasons why people come to this city.
Right.
So it is something that directly impacts us.
Yeah. Bathroom bill was one of the big topics of conversation, maybe the biggest at the legislature this week, but school finance was another. There is an attempt now by Chairman Huberty of the Public Ed Committee to overhaul the school finance system, including to address the recapture issue. This is not an immaterial fact for the city of Austin. You know, residents of Austin have temporarily put down their "He's not my president" signs to complain about recapture, right? Recapture is a big issue here. We had the mayor of Houston here a couple weeks ago. They're deciding now whether to stiff the state on their recapture payment. They voted in November not to send the $162 million they owed as the first year of their recapture payment, now that they've been designated as a property wealthy district, to the state. And in doing so, they've gotten the state to basically come back to them with a better deal. They're going to go back to the polls in May again to decide. Austin's recapture payment this year, as I understand it, is more than double what Houston's recapture payment was going to be before Houston residents complained about this. Why aren't Austin residents stiffing the state as well? And should they? Since it turns out that if you stiff the state comes back and says, we got a better deal for you. Why are you not advocating for the same thing?
I don't know enough about it yet. So I'm watching.
I just told you what you need to know about it. They told the state, up yours. Couldn't Austin do that?
And it's certainly something that we could do, I imagine. I need to learn more about it if you're asking me specifically on that. But that's an outrageous deal. I think right now Austin's paying what a third to a half or more of the total recapture.
It's about my understanding is about a $400 million. Is that right? About a $400 million payment that the city owes the state through a recapture.
So I worked up at the legislature, as you mentioned, back in '97. And back in '97, we were talking about trying to reform recapture and that rate. And quite frankly, I believe in recapture. I believe that a child anywhere in this state should have the same ability to a public education that anyone else has.
So you believe in a system of redistribution. Wealthy districts should help less wealthy districts.
Which is the same way any tax works that goes to the
You understand
state
that these days, Mr. Mayor, that's a controversial position, and that there are residents of the city of Austin who do not believe that their tax dollars should go to other communities.
And I think that's true, but I think that they're conflating two different issues, and that's why it's important to speak on this. It is not the challenge that says that children everywhere should have the same advantage. And that the state can't collect taxes and then send it out in an equitable way. The problem is the state is collecting it and then not sending it out back in an equitable way. Children that are in poverty are more expensive to educate. Children who are not speaking English at home are more expensive to educate. And our state recognizes that. So we have weights. When all the money comes into the state applies those weights and sends them back out to districts and sends a little bit more money to those districts that have disproportionately high children in poverty or children that are not speaking English at home. When I was in the legislature in 1997, we were fighting to change those weights because they had been established in 1983 and they didn't make sense
Different
today.
population.
different population. And Austin has a population which is disproportionately in poverty and disproportionately not speaking English at home. In '97, I was working to try to change with Senator Shapley the measures that had been created in 1983 because they were long overdue and out of date. You know what measures we're using today?
Same measures.
Same measures.
Right. Right now, 60% of the state is economic. Enrollment in public education is economic disadvantage. Right. Free and reduced lunch. I mean, there's no question that there's a lot of need in the state. The question is whether it is the responsibility of the city of Austin, or the responsibility of the city of Houston, per the vote of the voters of the city of Houston, to take care of the problems of the rest of the state, or if the state should come up with a new mechanism to deal with those problems.
One or two things should happen. Either we should be able to take care of our own problem, or if the state collects all the money, the least they should do is send it back out to the cities in an equitable fashion, and that's not happening today.
On the subject of controversial issues at the legislature, it appears as if the votes are there to pass a bill to outlaw sanctuary cities. You good with that?
Well, first, you know, I heard the president define sanctuary cities as a city that violates federal law. And since we don't violate any federal law or state law, then I guess we're not a sanctuary city.
At the moment, I mean, that's one of the controversies over the last couple of months is that the state is objecting to a decision by the sheriff to do what appears technically to be not a violation of the law yet. Correct?
It's not that it appears not to be.
It's
a violation
guidance.
of
It's
the law.
not.
It is not a violation.
It is not a violation of the law.
The sheriff is not participating to the fullest extent in holding people with detainers without warrants.
You support that decision by the sheriff?
You know, I fix potholes, I make sure the garbage gets
Oh,
picked up
Mr.
on time.
Mayor,
And I
if
try
you
to keep
think
my
I'm going to
people
let
safe.
if you think I'm going to let you off the hook with the pothole thing, you have come to the wrong place.
Well, let's go to the third one, which is safety, which is what I'm concerned about. So my public safety professionals come to me, and they say, in order to keep our community safe, you have to let us develop a trust relationship with the community.
Right.
Quite frankly, they're doing a good job. Austin is one of the safest communities in the country, and we're safe because our police have a relationship with the people in our community that, quite frankly, not all cities enjoy. We have victims of crimes that are willing to step forward in this city that may not in other cities.
And you think they would not do that if we followed the guidance on the immigration detainers?
As soon as that community begins to think that their local people are acting as federal immigration agents, it changes the relationship. We have people that are now hiding. If you talk to our public safety professionals now, they will say that there are less people coming to them, that people hide from them. That is not something that we have experienced in the past.
It sounds to me like you support the sheriff. Just say it. I support the sheriff.
I do. I support her.
You believe what
my
she's
police
doing
chief.
is the correct decision.
I believe what she's doing is keeping us safer.
And that's the correct decision. What she is doing, how she's handling it, is correct.
Because it's keeping us safer. It's consistent with what I hear from my police chief. It's consistent with what I hear from the National Association of Big Cities Police Chiefs. This is not an outlier position. You know, I just got PolitiFacted the other day on the statement that 43 states, in 43 states, there are places where warrantless detainers are not being...
And they said mostly true.
And they said mostly true.
Right. The Gardner-Selby Badge of Honor.
That's right. And I don't always get it.
Sew it to your sleeve. That's good, yeah.
But we have federal courts that say that to honor a warrantless detainer is a violation of constitutional rights, such that if you do that as a government official, you're not going to get qualified immunity, because now you know it's unconstitutional, and if you do it again, you're going to get...
So the governor's position on this has been that Austin is somehow behaving badly and needs to be spanked. And his response, his punishment is, we're going to take money away from the city and the county, and we're going to threaten, at least rhetorically, if not actually, to remove elected officials who don't act the way the state wants from office. Let's take those separately. So the state has said we're taking money away from Austin and from Travis County. Isn't that his right to do it?
Well, he's taking money away from Travis County because they detain people. Not
right, but
Austin
Austin is part of. I mean, it's like
for our city.
It's a Venn diagram, right? You're
That's
part.
right.
You're suffering as Travis County suffers.
That's right.
Right. So, is he in his right to do that?
I don't know the answer to that ultimately, but I think everybody's working off the assumption that he can, that this is grant money that he has the ability to be able to control, and he's held it back. And we can talk about what the effects of that are.
Well, let's. I mean, we have a story this morning on the Tribune site about the Veterans Court in Travis County being defunded, which, the Veterans Court has nothing at all to do with sanctuary cities or with immigration, but the Veterans Court is suffering for the sins, in quotes, of Travis County because the loss of funding has meant that the Veterans Court has been defunded. Sarah Eckhart, among others, lit up like a Christmas tree over the fact that the veterans are suffering for this.
Yeah, and it's not only that.
So the governor would say, by the way, if you don't want the veterans to suffer, have the sheriff change your policy.
I understand, and that ultimately puts cities in a horrible position. One of the things that get funded is a drug court. Judge Darlene Byrne, district judge, she's a saint. She is the judge in this community that is charged with, when it's warranted and needed for the protection of the child, to take children out of their families and put them into foster care, which is a horrible choice to make because a child that goes into foster care, just by virtue of that, has so many strikes against them when they start. But the only thing worse than that is to leave them in a family where the parents are drug addicts. So she's developed a best practice where they create a court. I don't think it's really a court, but the people in it feel like it's a court, and parents have to engage. They come in, they're crying, the kids are crying. They say, please don't send our children to foster. We'll do better, we'll do better, we'll do better. They're addicts. That's not something they can just choose that way. So she's set up a system where they can keep the kids, but they have random drug tests at some point every 2 weeks. And they have a court that they go to. She has learned that if she makes it every 3 weeks, they can't hold on. But if she keeps it every 2 weeks and they do that drug testing, they can actually keep the kids in their homes.
And she and that court and they're suffering as a consequence of it.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that got funded. So we're put in a horrible choice as a city. So as a city, I see these kinds of programs and I see what the money goes to. At the same time, I recognize that if we were to adopt this voluntary program, if we were to do that, we would impact, my public safety professionals tell me, safety in our community. So I have a choice to make. We as a community have a choice to make. We have to choose between safety and the money.
Have you said this to the governor? Have you made your case to the governor?
I've said this very, very publicly.
But couldn't you be the advocate in chief on behalf of the city of Austin and make this case? Since Austin is being made the poster child for this, couldn't you go to the governor just up the street? You know where he lives. Couldn't you go to his house the way people come to your house and say, Governor, this is hurting the city of Austin in many ways that you did not intend? And by the way, she's not breaking the law. Couldn't you make that case?
I think it would be good for me to be able to talk to the governor.
Do you want me to give you a lift up there?
Would you?
Okay. What happens if they change the law? I mean, I'm not a vote counter. I'm not a whip. Representative Seidlitz remembers the days when you thought you knew how many votes you had. Maybe you didn't. I can count to 76, I think, on this bill in the House. I know I can count to 20 on this bill or more in the Senate. In fact, it's already passed the Senate, so I don't even have to count. This bill's likely going to become law. What happens then?
I think the city follows the law.
You think or you know?
The city will follow the law.
The city will follow the law. Is there a point at which, I wonder, this is the year of the resistance. Is there a point at which some John Lewis-style resistance is in order? Are there laws that the legislature may pass that you believe passionately, sincerely, are bad for the city of Austin, but that the legislature, in its infinite wisdom or lack thereof, decides to enact, where the city says, you know what, we're going to resist? Because I hear you say, if the bathroom bill passes, we're going to obey the law. If the sanctuary cities law passes, we're going to obey the law. There are some who would say that at moments like this, if these laws pass and the problems you've identified are not suddenly not the problems just because the law passed, that the city's position should be, we're not going to go there.
I would see the city challenging laws in courts.
That's the resistance.
And that's resistance. I would see individuals expressing their political views by marching. Or by demonstrating. But I think that for the city, we should be trying to change those laws within the system.
Okay. Before we go to questions, and since we're talking about resistance, I want to ask you about Trump, the president. Is there a case to be made that Trump is going to be good for Austin?
Please.
Come on.
Please make that argument.
Okay. Yes, you were with her, blah, blah, blah. I get that. Don't relitigate the election. I'm talking about going forward. I mean, if there's a $1 trillion or a Brazilian dollar infrastructure plan from the federal government, aren't we going to get a big portion of that, and won't that be good for Austin?
If we can get big infusions of money for infrastructure, that would be great.
You'll take it even if the person who gave it to you is him. That won't be the resistance that you choose to engage in.
No. I mean, if the federal government adopts policies that bring us money for infrastructure, I'd take them.
Is there any other lens through which you can make a positive case for Trump's impact on Austin? You're the nonpartisan mayor of Austin. Let me remind you.
We really need infrastructure money.
You're not going to go anyplace else. Okay, good. I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions because I know there were good ones. I wanted to ask you about 10-1 and a whole bunch of other stuff, but we're not going to go there. I like where we stopped. Gentleman in the front, sir. Dale.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, the climate protection plan that Austin has is of great interest to me. If we do not somehow deal with transportation, there's no way we can meet our climate protection goals,
right,
in my opinion.
Good.
Yet electric vehicles, even though Austin is doing well, you can't tell me the last time you saw an advertisement on television for electric vehicles.
And you put that on the city of Austin?
Well, I'm wondering what the city of Austin can do.
Great.
Polls show 60% of the people in Austin don't even know that there's such a thing as an electric vehicle. So there's some kind of lack. What can the Austin Energy has agreed to put 300 electric vehicles into their fleet, but that's just a tiny little piece.
This is a great question. I would have asked you about transportation because I know how much you care about it and housing as components of the affordability conversation you've been attempting to have with the city. I didn't get to ask it, so it's asked. Why is Austin the city that refuses to deal with its transportation problems? Well, no, but I want to wrap it around. It's a turducken, basically. I'm wrapping your question inside mine. Yeah.
I think at some level for the longest period of time, I think that Austin took the position that if we didn't build the infrastructure, that people would stop coming, that what we were doing was bringing a lot more growth than would otherwise have occurred.
Right.
And I don't think that's true. So I think we ended up kind of behind the 8 ball, and now the problems are large. But we are taking steps. This is a community that came together that voted for a transportation bond election last November that was larger than the last 20 years of bond elections cumulatively.
Combined, right, yes.
So we are taking steps. We're moving to electrify fleets in the city. We're talking to other cities about coming together to pool our collective buying power to be able to get new electric bus options that are available to cities to make it economical for that to happen. We want to work with San Antonio and with Dallas to see if we can help with the industry, automobile industry in this state by opening up those angles. And the Code Next process that the city's engaged in right now, where we're doing the land development code, I believe will help us with.
You think the tools that you need to solve the transportation problems of this city are available to you right now?
No, I think that technology is developing, but I will say that there are a lot of tools that are available to us that we need to hold on to and to make fullest use of, because there's a lot of things we could be doing and should be doing and need to be doing that we're not doing.
What about the climate question, to Dale's point? You now have a federal government that, by and large, is going to be hostile to climate change and climate science. I think that's not a partisan statement. You have a state that has been hostile to climate science and climate change conceptually. Obviously, Austin goes its own way on that subject, as many others. Can Austin solve the problem locally if the state and the federal government are allied on the opposite side?
Austin alone cannot solve the climate change problem for the world.
But can you solve this climate change problem for Tarrytown? Because that's where I live. That's all I care about. Or can you solve the climate change problem for Austin? Can you localize the solution? Is the problem localizable, I guess, or the solution localizable?
The problem is not localizable. Because you're talking about worldwide climate patterns. But the solution begins locally. In order for this world to be able to deal with it, quite frankly, a significant part, half at least, of what has to be done internationally is done at the local and city level.
Yep.
And Austin needs to do its part. And needs to be an example. We need to be able to demonstrate to cities across the world that you can in fact do this, and that economies do well not in spite of actually taking climate change action, but in part because you're taking climate change action.
Yep.
And that's what the city of Austin has done in the past, and I hope continues to do.
Good. Question here. Sir.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm a passionate bike to work as a transportation option person, and so I talk to a lot of people about that. I think the single most important thing to get more people biking to work is building more protected bike lanes, i.e. putting a curb or parallel parking or both in between the bike lane and the road.
Yep.
How big of a piece from this most recent mobility bond is that going to be? How important do you think that is to getting more people within biking distance to bike to work?
I think providing choices for people in this area, as with so many other things, is critically important. Bicycling is a big component of providing those kinds of choices.
You're pro-bike.
A significant, sure.
Yeah.
You know, and I went with the Secretary of Transportation to 3 Northern European countries last fall, and it was interesting to look at 3 companies that were auto-centric.
Which countries were these? Were
Norway, Denmark, Amsterdam,
okay.
Oslo, the centric countries. And now, because they had made bike routes safe so that people felt comfortable using them, they were seeing exponential growth in the use of bicycles just because it's so much cheaper and it's easier to use. I hear the argument that that'll never happen in Texas because we're hot in Texas, and I understand that.
Yeah.
And not everybody will get on a bicycle. But when I'm stuck in traffic, and if I don't want to get out of my car, I sure hope the guy next to me would get out of his car.
Well, your
and
willingness
get
to
on a bicycle.
consider other options increases when you're sitting on South Congress or you're sitting on I-35 or MOPAC, right?
Absolutely, and we have to provide those kinds of choices, and we are in a community. By the way, the components of the bond we just passed had the largest contributions to the bicycle network that Austin had ever done before. So there's significant sums of money being put against that, but also dedicated lanes and improving transit. You know what we know in this city is that if we just had 20% of the people, 1 out of 5 in an office, adjust their commute time, if they came to work earlier or later or left earlier or later, if only 1 out of 5 people did that in this city, we would have free flow traffic on I-35 and MOPAC right now.
This is Celia Israel's argument, or has been her argument at the legislature now for consecutive sessions, not so much changing commuting times, but she's asking for telecommuting to be an option at the state level. You've advocated for telecommuting in some cases at the city level, haven't you?
Yes.
To lessen the amount of people having to come in and out of the core of the city.
And the evidence indicates that it makes workers more productive when that happens, and it's better for business.
Can you do anything about, since we're talking about congestion before we take that, can you do something about MOPEC?
There is something that's happening with MOPAC. It's not
Really?
our project. It's not our, it's not our project. It's not a city project.
Okay, so you can't do anything about it?
I can't make the project
just checking.
any quicker.
Okay. I hope somebody does something about it. Sir.
Continuing on the discussion of the 2016 transportation bond, Mayor, as you and I both know, during the campaign and during the process of developing that bond last year, I testified on 3 separate occasions that I thought there was underlying merit to the smart corridor concept, but that I had basically zero confidence in the ability of the city to implement it in a cost-effective or timely manner. We just learned last week that the implementation is already behind schedule. 2-part question. A, what is going to be done to get it back on schedule? And B, in the event that it can't be gotten back on schedule, is the city going to come back and ask the voters for more money for basically the same idea in 2018?
First thing I would say is it's not off schedule, because we haven't set the schedule yet. We have the consultants come back and we say, this is the amount of work we want you to get done in 8 years, and they're going to bring us that schedule. What we learned last week is that the people that are doing it have all agreed that this is an incredibly ambitious thing that we as a community have asked our staff to do.
Not news to you. You knew that it was ambitious.
We knew that it was going on, and what we've said to our staff is manage to that task.
Right.
That you can get this done, and if it means you need to bring in more staff, then come back with that.
Yep.
Pay for it out of the bond. If you need to go outside the city to third-party consultants to monitor these and to move them through, do that. Pay for it out of the bond. We will not be going back to the people for more money.
You will commit to not going back under any circumstances for more money.
Yes, because this bond was defined by this sum of money. What we said was, give us this amount of money and let us do everything that we can do on these corridors. And we've asked staff to come back, and we told the public that the staff would come back and say, this is what we intend to do over this time frame. We said we would create dashboards so that anybody in the public at any point in time could see what the financial burn is. The amount of money that's being spent, that they can see what's happening on the ground and where the projects are, that we would have public debates as we set up the priorities for that, and we're going to do that. It's going to be the most transparent and available massive transportation bond implementation that I've ever heard of. We're going to see things that are going to start happening in the third quarter. We're going to see tens of millions of dollars being spent on safe passages to schools with sidewalks. So I'm real excited at the prospect because we are delivering on the promise that we made to the voters.
Good. Ma'am.
You've been supportive of innovative solutions to problems that Austin faces. Can't the city think of a more innovative solution to problem vacation rentals than an outright ban?
So this would be another one of the sharing economy questions. Why are you banning short-term rentals?
Well, it's important when you start talking about a conversation about short-term rentals that there are two different types of short-term rentals, and you can't conflate the two. There is the sharing economy short-term rental. I own a home and I want to be able to make extra money on that home. I want to be able to use the capacity in my home that I'm not using so that I can make more money. I don't want to be around during South by Southwest, so I'm going to leave for that week and I'm going to make a lot of money on my home. This city has not banned short-term rentals, those kinds of real sharing economy short-term rentals. We haven't banned those at all. What we did say we did not want to have in our city was a different animal. It's where somebody goes in, a business person goes into a neighborhood and says, I'm going to buy a home in the middle of that neighborhood and I'm not going to use it as a single-family home with all the neighbors around it that are single-family home owners. And I'm going to put in that what is a, more like a hotel or a bed and breakfast.
A hostel of some
kind. It's a hostel sometimes, so that the people are constantly moving in and out. So the neighbors have come to us and they've said, when I bought into this neighborhood, I'm paying a lot of money, and I'm paying a lot of money to know the neighbors that live next door to me, so that when I go run to the store, I can knock on the door and say, hey, I've left Jimmy in the house. He's going to be fine, but I just want to let you know I'm running to the store. If he has problems, he's going to come over. You can't do that with a short-term rental because you don't know that second type of short-term
how are
rental.
those, candidly, how are those different? I don't understand. If I bought a house in a neighborhood and I lived in it,
right,
and then at some point I decided I no longer wanted to live in it and I was going to turn it into a rental property, I mean, what's the difference?
Well, you can turn it into a rental property, and there's no problem at all with you turning it into a rental property.
But why are you limiting my liberty as a property owner? If I want to rent that out on an increment of a year, or I want to rent it out on an increment of a month, why does the city have any place in this conversation?
Because communities do have some measure of control with respect to land use. I buy the house in the middle of the neighborhood. When I want to leave, I can't turn it into a gas station, even though it's my property.
Zoning.
It's a zoning. It's a land use control. Right. And what we've said is in a residential area, we want people who...
Yeah, but we're not saying give people the ability to turn their house into a Torchy's. We're saying give them the ability to rent their house out on increments that are generally acceptable within the confines of... Look, this is the city that birthed home away. It seems a little weird that the city's position on short-term rentals is no thank you.
Well, it is a continuum. Yeah. It's not a gas station, clearly. It's not a Torchy's. But it's also not a single-family home with a neighbor that you get to know over time, and that you have that kind of neighborly association with. So there's a continuum on there, and that continuum, gets defined by, how many people do you have coming in? How often are they coming in? Is it a different group of people every day? Are they partying until 3 o'clock in the morning? Are there any kind of controls? In a neighborhood where all neighbors live together, it's kind of self-regulating. I'm not going to keep my neighbor up if I know that I'm going to have to see them every day.
Right.
But if I'm only going to be there overnight, I don't even know who my neighbors are.
But what I don't understand is if I live in my house and I decide to go away for spring break, or for South by Southwest, and I rent my house out again in my neighborhood, and somebody comes in and they party till 3 in the morning. I mean, all the things you just described, which I would consider to be as a neighbor, unneighborly behavior, but okay. The people who rent my house for that week that you've said is permissible, they might do the exact same things that you just described. You can't really constrain that unless you ban every short-term rental.
I don't think that's true. If I have a home and I rent it out for 1 week and they have parties, I'm going to spend the next 51 weeks living next to the person who lived next to that party.
All kinds of people mad at me on the street.
That's how neighborhoods work.
Right. You understand, just to come back around to the way we started this conversation, on ride-hailing and on short-term rentals, Austin appears to be, you will spike this, hostile to the sharing economy. And Austin ought to be the city that is all about the sharing economy. We ought to embrace the sharing economy. It is entirely consistent with the zeitgeist of this city, and yet, at least to the outside eye, on ride-hailing and on short-term rentals, we appear to be hostile to the thing that we ought to be about.
And I understand that, and we are not hostile to the sharing economy, and want to do everything we can to be able to help that grow.
Yeah.
Again, there's an intersection between what is true sharing economy and what is the government's interest. We can't abdicate safety. We can't abdicate certain things. Austin needs to be the proving ground that can actually establish what is the sustainable model of a sharing economy's intersection with government, and we have the ability to be able to do that here.
Okay. Agnes, do we have time for more? Let's do it. Yes. Hi.
Hi, good morning. A few minutes ago, you had mentioned that you believe that Code Next will help with Austin's transportation problem. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Absolutely. You know, the Code Next will talk about what the city looks like. It is one of the tools that we have to actually get to a compact and connected city.
It's like a strategic plan of sorts, is that right?
Well, imagine Austin was kind of the strategic plan. The Code Next then becomes the rewrite of the development code, one of the things called for in our strategic plan. We need more people that are living along transit corridors. We need to have transit corridors that by use patterns enable our city to not only have mixed income living opportunities throughout our city, but also has the density and occurrence of people that will drive ridership and usage along transit so that it is successful. That's one way in which that happens. It means we have to have different city centers in our city so that 30% of our people in our region are not commuting in and out of downtown, so that there are areas like the Domain or other city areas in our city so that everybody's not trying to get to the same place.
Yeah.
A lot of those are land development questions, land use questions.
Good. Let's make this the last one. Mr. Lava.
I hate to labor the transportation problem, but when I look around this room, I don't see a lot of people who want 95-degree weather on the way home biking. And you're going to have to get the people out of their cars. And since 1975, there has been no increase in the planning for freeways in the city. It's been constant since 1975, and the population has more than doubled.
Right.
How are you going to get the people out of their cars is what you really need to do. You need to make it hard for them to be in their cars, worse than it is now.
So you actually think misery is a strategy?
Well, no, it's price or something, because you have to get the people off the roads if you're not going to build more freeways. We're the largest city in the country without an inner or outer freeway ring.
I think ultimately you're absolutely right in that transportation is only going to work in our city or any growing city to the degree that we can get people out of their cars. Ultimately, you get people out of their cars by giving them an alternative or an option that is better for them than being in their cars. You give them something that helps them get from one place to another place more quickly or more cheaply or more readily. And we have to move in that direction in order to be able to do that. I agree with you. Not everybody's going to get on a bicycle in 95-degree weather. I'm happy for all the people that are willing to do that because it gets some people off the road. But it's a question of having choices. And there are new technologies that are coming into the city. We're going to have in the spring here a company called Bridge, BRIDJ, which is a company that's going to have a non-fixed route kind of bus that you call the way you would call up an Uber and a Lyft, and it comes and picks you up, takes you where you're going, and it's constantly being rerouted based on who's calling and who's sitting on the bus. It's going to be new technologies like that. Chariot is going to come in, I understand, and try to do the same kind of thing. So we have to take advantage of those technologies. It is ultimately we have to add capacity to our roads, but adding capacity to the roads also induces usage. You know, if we were to change the commute time on Mopac right now as it heads out to Cedar Park, and we would cut the commute time in half by adding twice as many lanes, which we can't do, but if we did that, you know the first impact that would follow from that? Home prices in Leander would start to rise dramatically, because people who are not buying homes in Leander right now to commute to Austin would start buying those homes.
That's their problem.
I understand, but it's just not. But it's just. I'm just saying.
Can't fix everything.
And it's just not lanes is the point.
Yeah.
Because immediately that would fill up now with people commuting from Leander. So it's about having as many choices as we can and good choices.
Good. Next week we'll have the mayor of Leander here. Mr. Mayor, you're a good sport. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
Good. Enjoy it. Thank you. You have a lot of mayors in town, don't you, this week?
We do. Enjoy it. Be good.